Hello everyone, and welcome to Dix's Book Club. So I thought we'd start off with something that I personally have always enjoyed the content of. However, I've never actually read the story. My sister got me this big, beautiful book for Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Other Stories by Lewis Carroll. Now, I want to mention that I do not own this book. I was not the author of this book, but I did want to start reading it, and I wanted to share some of my thoughts with someone, but I don't really have a group that I can do a book club with, so I thought I'd do one here on the internet for all of you to enjoy. So I read through the first chapter, and I thought I would share some of my thoughts and questions, and if you want to put in the comments below some of your answers to my questions or your own thoughts, then feel free. I'm also going to be sharing some gaming content that me and my friends play, so however you choose to ingest this content, whether you choose to just listen, just watch, or do both, is entirely up to you. I just want to create a safe space for people to come and hang out, maybe talk about some books, maybe just watch some gameplay. It is entirely up to you, and I hope that you enjoy. So, I started off with the very first story, which is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And I read the first chapter, which starts on page 15 of my book, and it is called Down the Rabbit Hole. And I read all the way through it to page 31, and I found it intensely interesting. Because obviously, with the idea of Alice in Wonderland, or Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, there is the need for some suspension of disbelief, because there is a sort of magic to it. While it's never explicitly discussed, we all know from movies or TV shows that we've watched throughout our childhood that there are potions in it and crazy characters like the rabbit. Now, I found myself asking throughout this entire video, how old is Alice? It's intensely interesting that this book starts in a very different way than most most fiction stories do, in that we didn't have much of a character introduction. The very first line of the story, in fact, is talking about how Alice is very bored, sitting next to her sister on the bank because her sister is reading a book that is not interesting. And this is actually one of the indications that Alice is fairly young to me, since she is described as bored, which is a very child problem, as well as the book her sister is reading is not interesting in whatever way, because it has no pictures or discussions in it. And she thinks to herself, what good is a book with no picture or discussions? Now, we can ascertain that it's likely that her sister is reading some sort of school book or some sort of textbook, but that to me is an indication of Alice being fairly young and childlike. There's also the fact that she chases after the rabbit, and instead of thinking about what she saw, or as some of us as adults might do, shaking her head and going, I need to get some more sleep, she chases after it and jumps down the rabbit hole with no hesitation. Now, my thought here was, where is her sister? And why is her sister not paying attention to her? But again, for me, this was very indicative of Alice being fairly young, because not many adults or teenagers I know would follow a rabbit that was speaking, or at the very least would not jump down a rabbit hole with it, because, well, not all of us can fit down a rabbit hole, or not all of us would feel safe going down a rabbit hole, even if there was a talking rabbit in it. However, as she is falling in the tunnel, once she crawls through the rabbit hole, she finds herself at an edge and falls down it without having a chance to recover herself. While she is following, there's a very interesting section where Alice displays an adult-like skill for critical thinking. And it's interesting because not... A lot of children wouldn't have this kind of thought process. Let me read you the section. First, she tried to look down and make out what she was coming to, but it was too dark to see anything. Then she looked at the sides of the well and noticed they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves here and there. She saw maps and pictures hung up on pegs. She took down a jar from one of the shelves as she passed it. It was labeled orange marmalade, but to her great disappointment it was empty. She did not like to drop the jar, for fear of killing someone underneath, so managed to put it into another one of the cupboards as she fell past it. This, to me, does not ring true as a true child's thinking. A child might think that it could break if it fell down, so that they would think to put it somewhere else. But to actually have the moment of, I shouldn't drop this, I don't know who's under me, and who could be hurt by it, is to me a more mature way of thinking. So I found myself throughout the chapter looking for more and more clues into Alice's age, because a lot of the time, the way her thoughts are geared, they seem to me as very mature and entirely logical, and then very suddenly it's almost as if the author remembered she's supposed to be a child. She will say something that rings more truly to a child in the 6, 7, or 8 range. I'd like to read you another section from chapter 1 and 2, as I got a little bit farther into it. When she was drinking the Drink Me potion and eating the Eat Me cake, she thought very logically about it. She was very careful to read the label of the Drink Me potion before drinking it, but then after this is described, it is explained as she has been told by her friends that you should never drink something that is labeled poison, because then you might get sick. Now, this is a fairly logical thing, as I'm sure we all know. You don't want to drink something that is labeled as poison, for, the obvious reasons. However, again, it felt to me as though the author had Alice do a very logical action and then remembered she was a child and added something in there in order to remind us that she is in fact a child. She also goes on to, during a bit of panic, she struggled with recognizing herself. Partially probably due to the growing and shrinking she was doing during the Eat Me and Drink Me potion process. However, at some point, she starts talking about how she couldn't possibly be herself. The line exactly is, "Dear, dear, how queer everything is today, and yesterday things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've changed in the middle of the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little bit different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I?" Which, like we've seen before, is a bit of a back and forth. We've gone from critical thinking to a more childlike wonderment of, well, everything is strange, so perhaps I am strange, or everything is different, so perhaps I am different, which has a following and makes sense in a child mind to me. However, at this point, she begins thinking of all the children she knows that are the same age as her, which is not listed, and tries to figure out if she's changed into any of them. And she lists through some of the people that are in her age range or perhaps her class at school. And I just got a tiny little giggle out of how much she hates Mabel. She talks about her other friends and she says, "No, I couldn't be this person because I don't look like them." And then she says, "I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows very little. Besides, she's she and I'm I. Oh dear, how puzzling all of this is." And then she starts going through multiplication, which is indicative of school age, and then she goes through geography and gets all of those wrong, and comes to the conclusion that she might be Mabel, and if she is Mabel, she no longer wants to leave the rabbit hole, because she would not want to live her life as Mabel. And my question is, what's wrong with Mabel? Why do we hate Mabel so much? Why does Alice hate Mabel so much? I want the answers to these questions. If anyone knows, please tell me. I want to know what happened with Alice and poor Mabel. After the Mabel saga, we move into the fan. As the white rabbit runs by, she accidentally startles him, and he drops his gloves and his fan. When she picks up the fan, she starts shrinking again, and gets so tiny that she then has to swim through a pool of her own tears from when she was 9 feet tall. Now, that is interesting in and of itself. The idea that when you're 9 feet tall, your tears will be so large that a 15-inch tall person would have to swim in them. But as she's swimming through her tears, and struggling a little bit, she comes upon a mouse. Now, this conversation was quite possibly the most perplexing in regards to Alice's age, because as she's speaking with the mouse, she talks to him about her pet cat, Dahlia, I believe was her name. And she is describing Dahlia very much in the way that a teenager would describe their very loved childhood pet. She talks about how wonderful she is, how soft she is, how much she loves spending time with her in front of the fireplace at night. But when she accidentally mentions that her cat is a very good mouse hunter, she recognizes that she has offended the mouse, who does not say anything, as well as apologizes for it, and tries to make up for it by switching the conversation. Now, she does accidentally bring that conversation around to the same subject by speaking about a dog who can also hunt mice. But when the mouse leaves, in his frustration, which I think is completely understandable, she understands, and she feels terrible for how much she offended the mouse, which is something not even a lot of adults can recognize. So I struggled this whole first 2 chapters, because I realized halfway through this video that I actually read 2 chapters, not 3, or 2 chapters, not 1, but I find it so interesting, because there has to be a limit to her age, because there is a point in all of our lives where we lose the ability to be interested in crazy things instead of blaming ourselves for crazy things. Myself, if I saw a rabbit run by me that was talking and wearing a pocket watch, like I said at the beginning of the video, would likely shake my head and tell myself I need to get some more sleep or a cup of coffee. But children would be very interested in that. However, the way she talks, the way she holds conversations with herself, with other characters, the way she thinks, is very mature and logical. And she is referred to as a child, and her peers are referred to as children. So I'm curious as to exactly what age range she's in, and why she thinks the way she does. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I will read a couple more chapters and come back with some more thoughts and questions. I hope you enjoyed today's book club. If you are interested in joining us, you are more than welcome to. I read in my book from page 15 to 31, so the first 2 chapters of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. My apologies for saying only the first chapter the first time around this video. The next chapter is A Caucus Race and a Long Tale. I will likely read chapters 3 and 4 for our next discussion and write down some thoughts and questions. Please, if you have any opinions about my thoughts and questions, leave them down in the comments. Even if you don't agree with me, I'd love to have a discussion with you on your thoughts as well. Again, this book is by Lewis Carroll. I do not own or speak for the story at all. I'm just discussing some of my thoughts on it and would like to share them with you. Have a wonderful day, and I hope that this was a safe place for you, even if it was just for a few minutes. Dick's out.